5 days. That's it. Just 5 days. That's all I have to wait now. I just have to literally last 5 days, and I'm done. You see, in 5 days, the culmination of a story that began on May 25th, 1977, years before I was born, it ends in just 5 days. For 42 years, 42 years, the Star Wars films have captured the imagination of millions of people. And I'm 34 right now. I'm going to be 35 next year. What's that? Yeah, okay, I'm kind of a man-child, and that's okay, because I'm really passionate about this, because I've never lived in a world that didn't have this story around, and it's meant so much to me growing up. And it's been going on for 42 years. That's a ridiculously long time for a single story to be on for. And now, all of a sudden, there's going to be a definitive end to the Skywalker saga. For the first time in 42 years, an actual ending point. So I've been waiting for this moment almost my entire life. Because, like I said, I grew up with these movies. One of my favorite memories is me and my dad sleeping downstairs, staying up late, watching the original trilogy on TV. And I enjoy those times not just because I love the movies, but because it was a bonding time for my dad and I. We'd stay up late and we would talk and we'd share snacks, and it was just a great time for a father and son to be together. I have my friends now that I have relationships with where we discuss these movies and what they mean and the implications for society as a whole, because we're 16. We're all man-childs, and that's fine, because these relationships that I have are a part of my very being. And so to have something come to an end, it's filled us all with a lot of anticipation and a lot of joy. And most of the joy that we've had from this has been simply because we're waiting, and we've been waiting. Now, it's interesting that we're all so happy that this movie is coming out and that we have these moments of joy built on this franchise. Because what it's led me to discover is that while you are waiting for something, there can actually be a lot of joy. It's made me rethink the whole thing about being patient and waiting, and I think that's really good, especially this time of year. You see, because we're in Advent still, and we only have 10 days until Christmas morning. That culmination of months of preparing and planning, all of it will come crashing to a head in just 10 days. And we've been waiting and building up this anticipation. But how we wait is one of the most important things. And so my hope and my prayer this day is that while we wait, we experience the joy in waiting. Because there can actually be great joy in waiting. Our reading from James today starts off with this wonderful message. Be patient, therefore, beloved, until the coming of the Lord. You see, he goes on to talk about how a farmer waits patiently for their crops, and there's this payout at the end of the farming season. Because while they're waiting, they're thinking about all that they have to do. And once those crops are good and ready, they can harvest them. This is much like waiting on the Lord. While we wait for the Lord to come, how do we wait? And that's the question. Do we sit around twiddling our thumbs? Do we not prepare anything? In a very real and dramatic sense, are we being the church while we wait for the coming of the Lord? If Jesus Christ comes and brings a message of the kingdom of heaven is here now, a reality in your midst, how are we preparing for that reality? Now, we could sit around, surely, and we could do nothing. We could sit on our hands and wait and just be good little boys and girls and not do anything. But I don't think that's how Jesus wants us to wait for the coming of the Lord. I think that what Jesus wants us to do is be ready to share the coming of the Lord with all peoples. And really, when we think about what the coming of the Lord means, that should fill us with joy. And while we're filled with this joy, we should be not grumbling with one another, as James says. We should be doing these things that get us out into the world, sharing the joy found in Jesus Christ. Yes, work can be hard sometimes. I get it. I understand that. Every year, without fail, I always have to do the same thing, which is drag up all the Christmas decorations. And now, thanks to my wonderful, loving mother, I have a new tradition where I get to fight every year now with an 8-foot-tall inflatable Santa Claus. But it brings me joy because when my kids look at the decorations, I realize that all of that hard work was actually worth it. And so doing that work, I may be a little grumbly and a little bit of a grumpy old curmudgeon when I do that, but there is so much joy because I know what the reaction is going to be. And that's how we're supposed to labor. We're supposed to labor with joy. And we're supposed to wait with joy. But the problem is that goes against our very nature. Because we live in a society where instant gratification is the name of the game. If you want tacos at 3 o'clock in the morning, you can do that. You can absolutely get into your car, drive to a Taco Bell, and eat as much tacos as you want at 3 o'clock in the morning. That is a perfectly acceptable thing to do if you wake up and want tacos. Instead of just staying and waiting, you can go get what you want right then and there. We always want what we want right then and there because we think that's what we need to make us happy. Our minds wander and our minds begin to play tricks on us. And we start to lose out in the joy when we're waiting. Instead of building up this anticipation for this great thing, for this release that's going to happen, we start worrying. And we start thinking about maybe we missed the mark, maybe this isn't what we want, and all of these things, instead of just sitting back and resting in the pure, unbridled joy of waiting. I think that's kind of what happened to John today in our reading. See, John's message, again, was very simple. Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is near. It's coming. And so his whole thing, his whole message was based on this idea that the Messiah was coming, that the kingdom of heaven was coming. And so he goes out into the wilderness and he gets all crazy dressed and all of these things. And that's what he does. He says, the kingdom of heaven is coming. Y'all need to get right. And then Jesus shows up. And while this is happening, John does not just sit idly by. He does things. And unfortunately, those things land him in prison. And so now John, doing what he was supposed to be doing, lands himself in prison, finds himself in prison because he was speaking out against corruption and the powers that be, and that made people upset. And we know from our vantage point in history that John's story does not end well, as he later gets beheaded. But right now, in this instant, he's sitting in a jail cell, and he's looking around at his situation, looking at the moldy bread that's being served to him, looking at the cell walls, looking at the criminals around him, and he thinks to himself, is this it? Is this what I've been waiting for? Is this the guy that I was waiting for? What am I supposed to be doing here? Did I waste my life? I thought things were going to be different, he says. And I can't help but feel like all of this waiting has been somewhat in vain. And so he sends some of his disciples to talk to Jesus. And they ask Jesus, are you the one who is to come? Or are we supposed to wait for another? I find this question fascinating because my gut reaction at it is it has to be a little bit hurtful, but not an intentional sort of hurtful thing. I don't think John was setting out to intentionally try to wound anybody. That's just how it came out. He says, are you the one we are waiting for, or is there another? He tells him, he says, look at everything that's been going on. All of these people being healed. The lame are walking, the blind are seeing, the deaf are hearing, the dead are being raised to life. All of these things are happening because of me. He doesn't say it in a proud, braggadocious sort of way. He just says, look, this is what I'm doing. And John has to stop and think for a minute. Cross the T's and dot the I's and realize, oh man, this is it. This is what I've been waiting for. My circumstances right now, they don't compare to the joy of what's going to be happening right now, because this is the guy. The Messiah is actually here now. How amazing is that? You see, John was expecting something drastic to happen. Something that he thought was going to happen. And it didn't happen the way he was supposed to. It didn't happen the way he was thinking it was supposed to happen. Because of his current situation, because of what was going on around him, he had lost this spark and this joy that he had for the message of God. When in reality, the thing that he was waiting for was Jesus. Now, I'm not, again, trying to paint John in a bad light, but it paints John in a very human light so that we are able to identify with John. Because it's great to say we should wait with joy. It's absolutely wonderful. But it's so hard for us to do that, doesn't it? Isn't it? When we think about it, and we think about how we're supposed to wait, and we get anxious, and we get nervous, and we do all of these things, and we prepare, and we prepare, and we prepare, but we miss out on the fact that this journey that we're on, this journey can be a joyful experience, building up this anticipation, building up the things that we're going to do when this new reality shifts in. There is actual joy in waiting. It is weird. It's very strange. And again, it goes against our core being to think that we can be happy with waiting because we want it now. But we can't always have it now. Sometimes we have to wait. And the question becomes for us, how are we going to wait? Do we sit back and do nothing? And just say, I'll wait. That's one of my favorite dad lines. When kids are yelling and fighting, I'll wait. I'll wait until you're done. Then we can do what we need to do. Is that how we're going to wait for Jesus? Or are we actually going to be so moved by what is to come when Jesus comes? And are we going to be so filled with joy that we have no choice but to spread this joy to one another? I mean, it's a simple fact that time passes differently when you're active, when you're doing something, right? I mean, if you're doing something you really love, it seems like it goes by like that. But if you're doing something you drastically hate, time just drags on. For me in high school, math class was the longest class, and English class was the fastest, because I liked English class, and I hated math class. And when you're doing something you really care about, time feels like it's moving differently. And if we really care about Jesus, if we really want to experience the kingdom of God, which is still in our midst, while we wait for Jesus, shouldn't we be about spreading that joy and spreading that love? I think it's not a hard thing to ask. And we can find joy in serving God and caring for other people while we wait for the coming of the Lord. It may be a wait, and that's fine. We'll just tell Jesus, take your time. You do you, come when you're ready. But we can enjoy the wait, and we can enjoy the wait by serving God. Amen.